My name is David Tay with the Men of the Sacred Hearts, and you are?
My name is Tyler. I'm 15 years old, and I'm a sophomore in high school.
Great. Tyler, are you considering going to the seminary?
I would say yes.
Great. Can you tell us why?
Well, about a year ago, the summer before last summer, I went on a week-long retreat to Notre Dame College, and one of the things they had there was a confession. So they had a confession service for everybody in the retreat. But keep in mind, there was, I think, 200 people there total. 200 kids. We were all around high school age. So we were all sitting there in the Notre Dame Basilica, which is very beautiful. The Notre Dame Basilica is probably one of the prettiest Catholic churches that I've been to. So we're sitting there for 2 hours. That's how long it would take to get
waiting to go.
To go to confession.
Mm-hmm.
And I was near the back, or my group, we were near the back. So I was sitting there, just kind of meditating on everything and thinking about what I was going to say when it was my turn. I remember reading through this book that had all these different saints on it, because they were having every day they would have a competition where they would, when we all met up to sing songs and start off the day, they would ask us questions about a certain saint, and then whoever guessed the saint would get some merchandise from Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't end up winning any, but I was reading through that, and but I couldn't really focus on anything. I don't remember any of the saints I researched in that book, because I was thinking about where my life was going. I knew I wasn't a very good person, or a very good Catholic, I should say, before then. You know, I wasn't the best older or younger sibling. I wasn't the best friend to some of the people I met in school. And I had a lot of shame on me, especially because I knew that I was supposed to be Catholic. That's not the right mentality, by the way. Being Catholic is not, I'm doing it because my parents want me to do it. I'm doing it because my family wants to do it. I'm doing it because I want to follow God. I want to pursue Christ.
Whoa. Oh.
That's what it means to be Catholic. But at the time, I was just like, what does this all mean? I was very confused. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to confess everything. I'm just going to confess everything I have on my mind, and I'm going to submit myself fully to Christ. So I did. I went and I sat with the priest, and after I confessing, I realized there was a second sin, there was more sin, one other sin that I didn't even think about, which was doubting God's mercy. Because the whole time I was sitting there in fear, I was thinking maybe I shouldn't confess everything just because some things I felt God couldn't forgive, which is a sin because you're doubting God, the divine mercy that He offers to all of us. And I confessed that one last, and the priest told me that was the worst thing I had done. But I felt relief when he said that, because that was the thing that was keeping me from God, was my lack of humility, my inability to just go and humble myself before God and confess and receive penance and reconciliation. And that
So let me just interrupt you here.
Go ahead.
That's a very interesting point. So in your confession with what you thought was,
worse stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it was actually the one you really needed to do. And how did the priest handle it? Did he punish you?
No, not at all. He told me that, yes, that was the worst thing, but I don't remember exactly what he said, but he gave me a really good piece of advice about basically how to move forward. And he told me, as my penance, he told me to thank God for confessing me, which almost every priest will tell you as soon as you're done. And I think he also told me to start going to confession more. But what I mainly remember is I remember walking out when it was time to go, because that was the last event of the day. It was pitch black out. You know, the campus actually looked very pretty because there was lights everywhere as you would walk back to your dorm. So, and I remember just walking back to the men's dorm room after that confession, just like being happy and feeling free now, because Jesus had taken the cross off my back. He had forgiven me, and now I had the opportunity to move forward and really pursue a life of being a faithful Christian. And I came back from that retreat, and it was noticeable that I had changed. The people in my life began to see me differently, and I gained a reputation, in my family and at my school of being a very religious person. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy that people associate me with Christ, because I feel like that's my calling, or at least part of it is to, or that's really the calling of all Christians, is to impersonate Christ so that when we do good, people associate that good with Christ, and they're more encouraged to follow him. Which is why I'm still contemplating the priesthood, because who better at doing that than the leader, or than a leader of a church?
Great answer. So you could basically say, if you wanted to summarize it, that going to confession and doing a complete confession was basically a catalyst for you that got you into this new mode of thinking about possibly thinking about the priesthood as a career.
Of course.
As something that you would do when you're ready. You're obviously, this is what discernment's all about, but, yeah, that's great.
And I think that ties into the idea of what the virtue of humility really is. Humility is, of course, what you need for a complete confession. You need to be able to humble yourself before God. But it's also the basis of a virtuous life. So we all know that pride is the capital sin because it's the one that leads into all the other sins. Because at the base of sin is prioritizing ourselves above God. And obviously the virtue that counters pride is humility. It's the opposite. Not necessarily seeing yourself as less than what you are, but seeing yourself exactly how God views you, as like a fiber in the grand design of the carpet of our lives. So when you establish that basis of humility, you're basically submitting yourself to Christ and saying, God, I'm here, do what you will with me. And from there, God can build on that humility with other virtues, chastity, patience, temperance, prudence. And it's with that humility and with that confession and submission to Christ that a person can become a better Catholic.
Great answer.
Thank you.
So, how would you get kids at school that kind of talk to you about this?
Yeah.
Nicely or not so nicely?
Sometimes not. So a lot of the people in my friend group are not very religious. I don't reject those people because Jesus didn't reject those people in his time. He was friends with Gentiles and tax collectors and all sorts of sinners.
Right. And we're not supposed to judge.
Exactly.
Which is hard to do.
That's God's position, not ours.
That's right.
And I find that rejecting people for their lack of faith ultimately leads them further away from God versus accepting their friendship and showing them kindness. But yes, people do disagree with me, both from people that are partly religious and people that are fully atheist. But I think those people are actually very important. They play an important role in the development of a faith because they force us to challenge ourselves. They force us to learn more about our faith, because
you can't defend it unless you know it.
Oftentimes, because in reality, God doesn't really need us to defend him. It's not like God's going to get hurt.
Right.
Well, maybe not physically, but
obviously he doesn't. That's an excellent point.
He doesn't like hearing. He doesn't like seeing people turn away from him, but he doesn't need soldiers to defend him, because if we're just fighting for the sake of making our religion seem right, then that's out of pride. That's not because we love God and want him to look good among our peers. It's because of our own pride. So what we kind of have to learn to do is, when somebody asks us a question about our faith that we can't answer, we have to say, that's a good point, I'm going to think about that, and I'll get back to you. And then you go home, or later on the day you remember it, or you look it up, or you talk to a practiced theologian or an expert on the faith, and you say, okay, this person brought up a really good point. How can I handle this? And you'll walk away from that experience having learned something. And then next time you see that person, you can talk to them about it and say, hey, I went back and thought about that, and I learned this new thing. And in turn, now you've gained in your faith, but now you've also made that person consider a different perspective, So those types of, and don't forget, God does work through people that don't necessarily believe in him. He works through everybody because he can show his love and kindness almost anywhere in the world, even if people do reject him. And I kind of wanted to touch on this a little bit because last night I actually had a similar experience with this. So I don't know if your viewers know this, but today is Boxing Day. Yesterday was Christmas. And we had a get-together with our family at our house. So my cousins were over, and they are part of a Protestant faith. I don't remember which one, but they're not Catholic. And I don't remember what the context of the situation was, but they brought up the differences between our faith and their faith. And one of the things they brought up was purgatory. We believe that purgatory exists, but their faith did not. And they mentioned how purgatory was never mentioned in the Bible. The word purgatory itself is never said in the Bible. And they said that the concept of purgatory was adopted because of Dante's Divine Comedy, that the series where he talks about heaven, hell, and purgatory. They believe that that's where Catholics got the idea of purgatory. And I was thinking about it, and I realized, I don't remember any instance in the Bible talking about purgatory. So I started to question things. So later, when I was by myself, I looked into it, and I found out that that was wrong. Because even though the word purgatory is never said in the Bible, there's moments in which they mention some type of cleansing after death. I think there's a quote in Maccabees where it mentions God creating atonement for sin after death. I wrote some of them down on my phone. Would you mind if I shared them?
Sure, no, go right ahead.
Yes. I have this note something.
Handy little creature.
In fact, actually, I have this whole thing here where I write down some questions I have that I can't explain, and I look into the answers. So right now here we have, does purgatory exist? Let's see. So one of the quotes is, 2 Maccabees 12:46. Thus he made atonement for the dead, that they might be freed from sin. That's one of the quotes. I wrote down some others, like 1 Corinthians 4:11-15, and Luke 23:42 and 43, where it talks about the good thief and stuff. Those are I don't want to go too far in depth with those right now, but the concept of purgatory is mentioned in the Bible, and that idea of a place of cleansing before we can be made divine to enter the kingdom of heaven was a concept that was well in place in the Catholic canon well before Dante wrote his comedy. And besides, it sounds like the church disagreed with a lot of the things Dante wrote. So even though I do think his writing made the concept of the afterlife and those 3 spiritual places more commonplace, I don't think his writing actually influenced any Catholic canon because the church mostly disagreed with him. So then later, one of my cousins came up and I brought it up. I said, hey, I looked into it, and I found out that I just shared what I'd found. I said, yeah, you're right, purgatory is never mentioned in the Bible, but there are a couple verses that talk about some place of cleansing. And it wasn't like an aggressive, like, haha, you're wrong, nothing like that. But it was, and I thanked him for helping me learn more about my faith, and then he ran off to go play with my brother.
There you go. Well, you're probably aware that it was Blessed Mother. That was my source of purgatory, my first understanding of purgatory, because when she appeared to the seers in Fatima, she said, this is purgatory, and she's asking us to pray for the poor souls in purgatory, because that's the only way you can get out of purgatory and get into heaven. So my comment to my Protestant friends would be, if you believe in the Blessed Mother and the Virgin Mary, then
you got to believe in purgatory.
You got to believe that she's talking about this stuff, because that's one of the purposes of why she keeps appearing to people, is to ask us for more prayers. So great. Okay. Well, that was good. I think that was very impressive on how you handled that. So
yeah, and that was definitely the Holy Spirit playing a big role.
Oh yeah. So just kind of sit back and let the Holy Spirit start to
a lot of the time, because it's like, what was in Acts, I think, where it says, don't prepare your argument beforehand if you are brought into court. Your argument will be brought before you. You're not really supposed to think about what you would say to a non-believer if they were talk to you. You're just supposed to kind of let the Holy Spirit help you.
Great. Great. So, Okay, do you have anything that you would like to tell someone your age in our audience?
I have to think about that for a second. What I'd probably say is what I've already said, which is if you're ever confronted in your life about with a friend or a peer that questions your faith, don't respond immediately with, rejection or contempt to that person, but genuinely try to think about what they're saying and to try to see their perspective for a second. Like, obviously, don't let any corrupt ideas infiltrate your mind and take you away from God, but do understand that they are coming from a genuine place, and you should try to instead let that person's perspective teach you something about your faith.